Hey guys, how you doing? This is Bobby Davis from the tech capital of the world, Kernersville, North Carolina. We got a big show today. Kevin, you're already here. No introduction necessary.
Yep, because we have an extra person today.
We have an extra special guest today.
So we're starting it out, and then we're going to bring somebody in a minute.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's cool.
So we're a show about .NET today, obviously, and C#. As if you've been living under a rock, or maybe you don't know, but .NET 5 will be out in just a few months, and that's going to be a big industry shift as projects and everything moves over to the .NET Core platform. Today, we're going to look at how you build a web project in .NET Core, complete with a database in 45 minutes.
In 45 minutes.
No pressure on our guest. He can do it. I have faith in him.
It's going to be good. I hope it breaks so we can fix it. I like that stuff.
I don't want it to break. I want it to be flawless.
I like when it breaks.
I expect flawless execution. That's what I expect.
Yeah, no extra pressure, right?
So let's say hello to some people, and then we'll get our guest in.
Yeah. Let's see here who we have here. Look at this. Thomas was here first today. That's funny. That was at 11:12.
He's supposed to be in class.
I don't know if he's still here or not. So thanks for joining us, Thomas. Alfredo's here. Adam's here. Adam is a moderator, both on here and on Discord. So thank you for that, Adam, and thank you for joining us. And Adam had to tell Maverick not to post something. I did see that this morning.
Get the hammer down.
I don't know what you posted in there, Maverick.
We didn't see it,
but
Maverick.
I didn't see it, so I don't know what it was. Adam cleanses my eyes for me by getting rid of it before I see it, I guess. Right. I don't know what it was, but yeah. Try and keep it PG for that stuff. Yeah. There's, but it's good. But it's good. Oh, that's funny.
So Raphael has solo flawless. So that's what expected from our guest today. Solo flawless. That's a Destiny term. So
I like it. I thought there was a new thing that you've been doing at the weekend.
No,
but that's not
prophecy.
Okay.
The prophecy dungeon solo flawless. That's what I'm going to do.
Okay.
Before the end of the year.
Okay, that's the goal.
When I do it, I'm going to dance on camera.
Wow. Okay. So I'm guessing you're not doing it because that's a big claim.
It's too hard.
That's funny. Abdullah's here too. Hey, Abdullah, thank you for joining us. You have some questions too, and we'll get to some of those too. Let's see. Who else is here? We're here. I see that. We commented a bunch already. It's me or you, one of the two. Right. Marco is here too. Thanks, Marco, for joining us. And we'll get to some of you guys' questions in a little bit too. Ajinkya is here too. Look here. Who else we got? Maverick's here. He says, "Hey guys, guess what day it is? It's Meme Monday." And we will get to a meme here in a second. I chose one of your memes. I liked it. Where are we? Rafinko's back. Hey, Rafinko. Andreas is here. And he says, computer says no. which I'm guessing he knows where that comes from. There's a show called Little Britain, and there's a really good skit on there where the guy is a travel agent person, and it's the best thing ever. It's the funniest skit. You should actually watch it. I should put it on one of our videos at some point.
Okay.
It's funny. This lady will take all this information, will type it on the computer, and she'll look at the thing and be like, computer says no. It's like the computer just gives you everything. I think it's funny.
Right.
Everybody should go watch it. Zero Rule is here too. Hey, Zero Rule. Oh, I like your little icon there too. That's cool.
Nice. A little logo action.
That's neat. Yeah,
I like it.
Drew's here, excited for today's topic. I am too.
Nice.
So that's cool. Hajubi, sorry if I mispronounce it, is here too. Thanks for joining us. Said L is here. We have a lot of people here today. It's cool.
Right.
Fee's here. Welcome back, Fee. Kenneth is here too. Thanks for joining us, Kenneth. We appreciate it. I think I missed Mark already. Esteban's back.
Hey, Esteban.
What does he say here? Okay. Awesome. That's very cool. Hey, tell us what you made. I'm interested.
Yeah. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Mehmet's here too. And then Esteban was back too. Brian's here.
Hey, Brian.
Christian's here. Jurgen's here. Wow, everyone's here today. Tim P's here.
The .NET gets them out. C#, man.
Apparently, everyone wants to come do something with .NET. Yeah, so we're gonna do something it's basic. We're gonna spin up a basic kind of app, right? We're gonna spin up something that's sort of high level, not overly complex. If you guys have questions as we go through, write them in chat. And I'll try to get to them. If they're applicable at the time, I'll try to get to them. If not, just make sure we put them in. If I miss it and you want to get it answered and it's something that's applicable at the end, type it in at the end again. I'm okay with you typing in questions a few times. That's fine. Just I'll try and see them. Our new system, when we switch to it, will be better for this because I can mark them to come back to, but in this one I can't. So if it's something that I sort of gloss over, just type them in towards the end again, and when we do the Q&A part, now I'll try and do it. But if you have a question at the time that's something applicable, I'll try and put them to these guys so they can answer them. Let me do a meme first.
All right, let's do it
before we jump in here. Let me do a So
I like the
I looked at the explosions. We haven't. So hold on. We have a new video coming out tomorrow. So, which by the way, let me talk about this before I even talk about. No, let me do the meme first. I'll talk about this after.
Do the meme. Yeah,
let's do the meme first because I ran the bumper now. So I like this one. I thought it was pretty funny. Saying RTX off and RTX on the video graphics card. I thought that was pretty good. That was pretty good. And then there was this one too, which I know Adam will like because he's a big AMD guy versus an Intel guy. But these wars between these guys, these brands are nuts. Like it's up and up and up all the time. It's crazy. I think it's funny. Let's look at like these 18-core CPUs and 16-core CPUs. It's crazy.
I like it.
We have some crazy technology on our desktops these
cheaper.
days.
Yeah, like I want them to keep both staying in business.
Exactly. Oh, exactly. Same with AMD and NVIDIA too on the graphics card. Like keep pushing each other. Like right. NVIDIA's rolling at the minute, but I'm okay if AMD releases something and it's killer. Like,
yeah, it's kind of cool.
I like that stuff. It's interesting. So yes, before we introduce our guest on and do some coding, we changed our format slightly.
A schedule
change.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to be live Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Tuesdays and Fridays, hopefully we're going to release like pre-produced content on those days. At least one of those days for sure, but hopefully both. So we're going to do pre-recorded stuff. We figured out a way to do pre-recording remote. So our first one comes out tomorrow. So if you guys could support us on that, that would be awesome. When that video comes out, go watch it, go like it, click the ads. That's cool too.
Click the ads. Hit the affiliate links.
Yeah. All of that stuff just basically promotes our videos up. The more you click on stuff and take interaction with it, the better it is. Same for this kind of content too. If you're here and you're watching it and you enjoy what we're doing, just give us a thumbs up. If you're not subscribe. We'd like that too. That'd be great.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to do a mix moving forward of pre-produced content, going back to stuff we were doing before, and we're going to keep these lives too because we enjoy doing this and you guys show up. So we're definitely going to keep doing them.
Kind of cool.
Yep. Let's do. Andreas likes how it's Mavericks meme time. That's it now. It's just going to be that. That's just its name now. Whether Maverick moves on and never comes back again, his legacy will live here.
However, there is a chance for some of you guys to also have segments named after you on the new platform. We'll see. There
is.
We got some big plans.
We do. So that could be cool.
Where you can have a segment named after you.
Yeah. And we'll keep them as long as we feel like keeping them. Brian's AMD, Adam's AMD.
Yeah.
Sorry, what is
Brian wants to know if we're going to use the Black Magic. I'm using it right now, man. This is shot on the Black Magic Pocket Cinema 4K.
Yeah. Yep. So, and yes, it will be. We're shooting on that exact same camera, right? You changed to the exact same camera, didn't you?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we're running it through an A10 Mini. So, yeah, that allows us to do some screen sharing stuff that we're going to work on too. So, yep.
No, we're not buying the 12K camera, someone asked. So, I have an Ursa Mini. Yeah, we have an Ursa Mini.
We're not trading it in?
No, we have an Ursa Mini, which is a cinema camera that 12K is replacing. It's upscaling that. And then we have a Pocket Cinema 4K, which is what is my webcam right now.
And we have two studios as well. We have a 4K and a 2K Black Magic Studios.
Right.
Yeah. I'm surprised Bryce hasn't already tried to convince you to get the 12K. Or has he? He has it. Okay. There you go. Okay.
He sent me a YouTube review.
So. That's funny. He's just like, Dad, take a look at this. Like,
yeah, exactly. My son's in film school, so
That's funny.
We don't need a 12K camera.
Well, who needs one? I mean,
I know.
you just want one.
It's good though. It's a pretty slick rig.
Okay, so let's get Jason on to do this demo.
All right, cool.
Let's introduce.
I'm going to introduce our special guest today, is Jason Twichell. He is one of the lead instructors here at Coder Foundry. And if you come to Coder Foundry, and some of you guys have been in the class, I see Brian Quinn, Thomas Saints, you know Jason very well. Today, we're going to go through .NET Core with Jason. So let's welcome Jason to the show. Hey, Jason, how you doing?
Oh, we can't hear you.
Mic. Your solo flawless
is
already
there you
done.
go. There you go.
How you doing this morning, guys?
Awesome.
So that's cool. Jason, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm ready to take a quick walk around this new core thing here.
Okay. So .NET Core 3.1 or 3.4 or whatever it is. I forget what it is right now.
I think I'm running 3.1.
3.1. Okay. Cool.
Is that the latest production build then? You're not doing anything
right now, yeah.
Beta or anything crazy like that?
You can get .NET 5 in Visual Studio, but you got to download the SDK separately.
Okay. But that's not released yet, right? Is that a beta or is that what is that?
Preview 7.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
So
just to make it confusing.
it'll be out November. So when you're looking at it, August is next week, and we're out 60 days out from the production release. It'll probably go what's called GA or production ready before November. That you can run stuff in it. So it's kind of cool.
Okay,
a lot of things going on, and it's just more than just web. All right, Jason, so tell us what you're going to show us today.
Well, today I'm going to be showing you how to start a new core MVC web app. Okay. So I'm going to be opening up Visual Studio, taking us through some of the initial screens that we see, talking about some of the choices that we can make en route to getting our first project started.
Okay. Awesome. I think Kevin has a question for you right away. You had a burning question for Jason, didn't you?
Did I? Oh, yeah, I did. I need a dad joke to start.
We hear you're epic with dad jokes. So
Well, it's funny that you say something because I was actually thinking about retiring soon. So that leads into my joke. My joke is, how do most programmers get wealthy?
Don't know.
Through inheritance.
Through
Through inheritance, folks. But
I need a finger for that, don't I? But
yeah, to let you know when the joke has been made, when the punchline has in fact been delivered.
Oh, that's funny. Not only a dad joke, a programmer dad joke.
Oh boy!
Talk about delivering, Jason. That's going to be better than
that.
Yeah. Cool.
I want to throw a hello.
You got some fans on here. Looks like OFC Ashton Ray.
Hey, Ashton. Hello.
So that's
good.
She
looks like I think she's positioning herself for good things too.
Yeah,
Ashton.
Big week around here for a lot of them. So
big week
demo day this week at Coder Foundry. We have several employees, and a lot of you guys that are watching right now are demoing this Thursday. So it's kind of cool. Awesome.
Yeah, I've got a couple requests to get together with some former students to make sure that they're polished before that demo.
Yeah. Cool. I think we have a run through this afternoon, I think. So it's going to be fun. Yeah,
cool.
Yep.
All right, well, let's share your screen here. Let's see what you can do, man. Let's see if we can get
all right.
Slow follow us.
There we go. So my disclaimer is, if anything goes wrong or doesn't work, it's part of the presentation.
Okay.
Part of the presentation.
Every demo fail that I ever do is always part of presentation. It's built in.
The expected.
You're going to use Visual Studio 2019 right now, right?
Yeah, I'm getting ready to use 2019. I've got most of the latest updates in place. I think I'm running like 16.9 or some new version. I'd have to look 16.6. But down here at the bottom, I got my Visual Studio. It's when I right click, it brings up all my recently used projects. But I'm just going to start a project from scratch here and kind of show you some of the interfaces that you'll see and some of the wizards that you're likely to run into. So for most of us, when we're first starting in Visual Studio, we're not going to be able to see all this history. Right on the left here is a bunch of history for all of the previous projects I've been working on. Now, over on the right-hand side, I'm just going to choose this create a new project. Okay, I could also choose continue without code to take me to the main interface, and I could from here say file new project. Either way, I'm going to find myself in the wizard that asks me what type of project I want to create. So
now, am I correct in saying that this view differs depending on which packages you've pre-installed? Is that still true?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. The wizards in Visual Studio in multiple areas will differ based on the version of Visual Studio. Usually, I preface my walkthrough with that in the event that some students are running an older version.
Right.
In which case,
yeah,
I tell
you're
them,
exactly. You're like, hey, I go to click this, but it's not in the list.
yeah, it's not exactly.
It's generally because when you installed the application, you didn't select it to be one of the packages to install, right? Is that a common thing?
Right. It installs templates, Kevin.
Is that what it is? Templates? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My terminology is bad.
No, you're right. And also based on the version of Visual Studio itself, the actual wizards to get you from point A to point B will change as well.
Okay. So one thing that I want to point out real quickly here in the power of Visual Studio before Jason gets started, not to interrupt your studio thunder, Jason. Notice on the left-hand side, you can start a core app, you can start a console app, you can start a ASP.NET, what I'm calling a legacy or .NET Framework web app. You can start a Xamarin app, a console app, you can start a Blazor app, and you can start an empty project. But you probably haven't installed the Windows development stuff, I bet you, WPF or WinForms. So you could do that as well, all from the same tool.
Yeah, very robust language and project templates to get just about anything that you want done.
Cutting After 30 is asking, are there major differences between Mac and PC version of this? There's
not anything right now that I'm aware of. So you can run them on both, and it seems to be pretty good. Anything that you ran into, there's workarounds for, but for the most part, it works the same. And they're making it better and better every day. And that's because of the cross-platform ability of .NET.
Here's another story. I'm going to ask this as a question too, though, because Andres says he's still using 2017. Is there a reason to still be using 2017 over 2019?
Got legacy going on. Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, I found out that there's much better integration with some of the peripheral tools too, including Xamarin and whatnot. That's been getting better and better over the years. But a lot of the problems that we used to have in versions past have been resolved with better integration.
All right, so let's crank up a .NET Core web application. All
right. So as Bobby mentioned, this was the older school ASP.NET 5 approach where we're using ASP.NET .NET Framework. The new one here is going to be ASP.NET Core web application. So I have that in my recent project templates because I have been messing around with it. And if I select that and press next, it's going to walk me through a typical project creation wizard, and I'll call it YouTube Core Demo. And I'll just leave this checkbox unchecked, and that's just because I like the structure separated. Every now and then you're going to have multiple projects inside of a solution. So by not placing the solution in the same project, it's actually structured better, and I prefer this, so I'm going to leave that unchecked. And for regular HTML applications, by the way, if you're using Netlify, you have to be careful with this checkbox because based on whether or not this is checked, you're going to have to make a corresponding change to one of the configuration files for those of you that may have been recently walking through a Netlify publish. But anyway, we won't be using Netlify here. Yeah. So I'm going to create this project, and we're going to create it as a web application using the model view controller design pattern. And you can see what this does here, project template for creating ASP.NET Core applications. And it's going to be not used for a RESTful service here. This is going to be simply a database with a model. So we'll have this chosen. The authentication, this is going to determine whether or not we're going to provide the infrastructure that's necessary to register and to log in and to authenticate so it knows who you are and possibly even authorize certain areas if you can or cannot go to this particular action based on your role. But if I select individual user accounts, it's going to tell me that we'll be managing our users in our local user store in-app. So I'll click OK, and that helps me quite a bit because it scaffolds a lot of the infrastructure to talk to the database, including the application DB context. So
a question about this screen right here, Jason. Project name and solution name. What were the difference between those two things on that previous screen?
So the way that these are structured is that typically a solution consists of one or more projects. And it's very common for people to create a project and think that that's the only structure that's possible. Most of our students that come through the class, when we create a project, I'll show you here, the solution up here is a high-level, top-level kind of a umbrella for however many projects are inside of the solution. So that's why we have the opportunity to have different names. It just so happens that by default, when I create a project, the solution and the project name are the same. But in fact, I could add another project to this solution and it would stack right up underneath here. And typically I might want to do something like that if, let's say, for example, I were building, now this is in the old days, I don't think you have to do it this way anymore, but you can architect your code such that one project is where all of your classes are. So we build that into a DLL, we reference that DLL into another project. So for that reason, we could have multiple projects underneath the same solution. But as part of the bootcamp, we don't typically do that. But in production, in the real world, it's done often.
Okay. All right, I'm going to get one more question here from Estevan. He says, what's the best way to handle version control in BS projects? I currently have multiple projects under one solution, building API plus mobile app. It doesn't feel right all combined. What I would do is, typically what I would do is separate mobile from API, even though you're calling APIs typically from your mobile app.
So you're saying you would have two solutions for these?
Probably would.
Okay.
But you can do it all at once. It's just that when you do a build, if you do a build on the solution, it'll try to build both projects, and an API project will build way faster than a mobile project. So I would separate those concerns into its own file. And then obviously it's source control GitHub using Git. And we use GitHub here at Coder Foundry, but Git or any kind of Git version control would be the best way to do it, whether that's GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever. So hopefully that helps. All right, Kevin, we'll keep going, Jason.
Okay. All right, well, you'll see here that as soon as the project is created, we're met with the default screen. And really, the only thing I do with this is close it and get it out of the way. And I come over here to my Solution Explorer. So before we actually start getting into the code itself, the Solution Explorer gives you an opportunity to start seeing the structure behind the scenes. And the MVC acronym stands for Model View Controller, and we have folders for our models, folders for our views, and folders for our controllers. And the general pattern here is such that when a user wants to see a web page or a view, they will type in an address. The address will be the request will be processed by the route engine in our application and will come into any of the controllers that have been set up to perform CRUD operations on our models. From there, it'll come in and try to execute one of the actions. And the action is actually what's responsible for rendering the view. So what we end up happening is a request comes in from the user, it finds its way into the controller, and then finds its way into the action. And then once it's in the action, it will do what it needs to do, perform some logic, maybe go out to the database, and ultimately it's going to render a view. So the first time a user sees a web page in MVC, it's usually because it has gone through a controller, gone through an action, and the action's job was to render a view or to show that page. So that's the high-level overview of how communication works in this application. Comes into the controller goes out to the database, and then ultimately shows a view. And then a user may or may not interact with that view and then press a button. And what ends up happening is if you want to store or edit or delete data, it goes back to the controller. It goes back to a particular action. The action processes what you want to do, and then it gets persisted to SQL, and then it redirects you to a different action, which usually just shows you a different page. So anytime we see a page or a view, it's because an action has rendered one. So we never do anything without going through a controller, going through an action, possibly talking to a database, which then loads up data into a model. So that kind of brings us to the first piece of the puzzle here, is that, let's say, for example, that I wanted to create a simple application that would allow me to enter some movies, a title, a genre, maybe a price, and maybe when it's coming out, a release date.
Yeah. So before we get to that, run this and show them what Visual Studio did for us.
Okay. So before doing anything else, I haven't typed any code really, and I should have more or less a functioning application. So what I mean by functioning application is that when I press the start button, it goes somewhere. And what turns out to be the case is that the project is configured by default to start at a certain controller and a certain action. And that's what we're going to see right here.
And while that's loading up, one thing that I find what people may understand is, like, when you reference that URL, as you were saying, it goes to a controller on the server side. So you can, it's basically, you can implement security on the request before pages are rendered. One of the big things that this allows you to do.
So what you're seeing here is on the URL, you're actually seeing exactly where we are in the application. That /home is telling us that this request was processed by the home controller, and then the /index means that in the home controller, the specific action that we're interested in is the index action, as opposed to any other action that might be in that controller to show a view. So you can see here that this is a view. This is a web page, right? So this is what we're talking about when we're rendering a view. We're rendering a CS HTML file that's got some Razor code in it, combined with some HTML.
This did quite a lot. It gave you like a header, a menu bar, a footer. Like,
oh yeah, man. That's the tooling in Visual Studio. If you don't learn how to use some of this tooling, you're not going to be as efficient as you could be, for sure.
Right.
Especially as an in-house application.
Let's go through a quick web page change. Like it says, learn about building web apps with ASP.NET Core. Let's say learn to code at Coder Foundry. Change that to, like, let's make an ad.
Okay. So what we're looking at here, guys, is the index view. We've got some code on it, and this is just a regular anchor tag, but the anchor tag itself might not be written in plain HTML. So let's go take a look at that. If we're going to go into the application, the project, and go into our Solution Explorer, what we'll find is that for every controller, we have a corresponding view subfolder. So in this case, the home controller, which is, the default class that processes requests, default class, home controller, has a home folder inside of the view, and this index is where the project is configured to start by default. So if I double click on this, I'll see why it says what it says. So that is a regular old HTML anchor tag, and here we've got two pieces to it: the text that the user sees, and then the destination when it gets clicked. So I will say, learn about fullstack.net coding at Coder Foundry, and that's what the user is going to see. And then when they click on it, just tell them to go to www.coderfoundry.com. And if you look in other areas, you'll see that the links are not always created like this. If you are using the Razor helper methods and you're going to be going somewhere inside of your application, you're more likely to see code that looks like this when building a link. I'll just show you this real quick. And Kevin, you'd mentioned something about that header and that footer, that shared navigation.
Yeah.
All that comes from this underscore layout. And if we scroll down here, we'll see some code that is definitely different from the previous version. For example, this anchor tag right here, right? This is also an HTML anchor tag, but the route is actually constructed using a few different attributes. For example, the default ASP area, which starts off as blank, but you can have multiple areas if you so chose. This is where you could actually see that the controller that this is taking you to is home, and the action that this is taking you to is index. So what this does is it's a way for these two things, or even these three things combined, to render a path so that it knows where to take you when you click on the link.
So we got a question in from Abdullah. He says he wants to know what Razor is, and is it a templating engine? If you want to handle that one, or I can, either way.
Well, I don't think it's not really a templating engine, so to speak. We've got tooling in Visual Studio that creates views for us, but a Razor is our mechanism for executing C# inside of an HTML environment, but it also has a lot of helper methods, and it's a framework for helping us write HTML. So a lot of the helper methods build HTML for us.
Yeah, it also does the binding, so like it can do the inserts, like when you're looping over a model, which we'll show here in a second. It's actually doing the replacements for, so it does templating as well. So it's more than templating, I think.
Yeah, it's much more.
We'll get into that in a second.
Yeah, much more. So anyway, if I just save this and show the refreshed page, let's see what this looks like here. Home index. Did I not save this? Let's come in here. Yeah. Save it. That would help. And let's go back and refresh this thing. Am I on the wrong one? No. Let's try this. Restart. So this is my home index, and the only thing that changed is this little bit of text. So that should be able to be seen right away. Learn about fullstack.net coding, and then if I hover over this, you can see at the bottom left that we're going to go out to Coder Foundry. So if I click on that, it just takes me to where I told it to go when I click on it.
Yeah, commercial. Yeah, there you go.
Coder Foundry. So that's usually where we start.
The syllabus.
Yeah, so that's usually where we start, is looking at probably one of the easier pages so that we have some understanding as to what it is we're looking at when we see all of this code. There is a commingling of HTML and ASP.NET style syntax.
So what is that section at the top there, the little @ and the view data title homepage?
This is actually the syntax that puts us into Razor mode. What that generally means is that we can actually write code right in our view, so that we can declare variables, we can call functions, methods rather, and we can do other things as well. Like this view data is most likely being used to pass data to another action, right? So that data is present already when we are inside of a view or if we get changed to redirected to another action. So the view data is part of a mechanism that makes data available for our views or for our controllers.
Okay.
Yeah. And then most of the other things that you see there, class equals text center, class equals display -4. You're looking at Bootstrap 4 classes, Bootstrap 4 classes.
And it just put those in by default too.
Yeah.
It's just there. Okay.
It's a template, yeah.
I mean, in fact, when I bring a model on, for example, if I wanted to add a model for a movie, what I'm doing is I'm replicating a physical, like real world object in code. So a movie has a title, a movie has a price, maybe a release date, a genre, all of these different things. And I'm going to have to do something in code to mimic all of those properties so that I can model it in code. So that's kind of why we call it a model, because it is something that models a real world object.
Okay.
So
this is what we're going to do next is like a code first implementation. There's no database yet, right?
Actually, there is a default database that was put in place because I changed my authentication type.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But we're not going to extend it. We're not going to extend it. But what we are going to do is use it, right? We're going to use it. And that, as simple as that sounds, it might be a little bit confusing, but we'll be able to see that as soon as I actually start scaffolding off of that model.
So let's make a model.
All right.
Let's do it.
So let's make a model. So first of all, when we're talking about making models in our class in the bootcamp, we're usually talking about code first, which means our models that we build are going to be responsible for building the database and the relationships between tables. So we do code first. And because we do code first, I'm going to add something quickly. This is a new project, so there are a couple of things that I probably will need to do in order to get everything working. One of them is to go into my tools and to manage my packages for the solution. There's a good chance that I need to update some stuff. So I'm going to come in here and update all my core related tools, especially this tooling. You can see that there's basically a sub change from 4 to 6 here. So I'm going to grab all of these updates.
This is the same for every project then? This is a project specific thing you're
updating? So for web, it has the base ones coming in right away.
Okay.
So what this is doing is installing Entity Framework, Identity, and SQL Server so that you can access SQL Server.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I've got previous versions already installed, so I'm just going to add the newest versions for this project. And this is just updating all of those NuGet packages, and you can see all of the output here. Pretty soon, I'm going to be interacting with the system in the console manager, which is probably an implementation of PowerShell behind the scenes, I would imagine.
The other thing, Kevin, those package management is really built into Visual Studio so that when Jason pushes this to Git, and I went and pulled down Git, I don't have to store the packages in my version control. I just update them from the package manager console, and I'm all synced up. And that way, our source code repository is simply source code.
So it keeps a bunch of it local on your machine, and then you're just passing across. Okay, I could see that.
Yeah.
So for me, that's kind of like if I'm editing a video, it's like giving you the timeline without the source.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. But the other thing too is like you don't get into these other problems where what version are you using of any framework, Jason? So you don't even have to ask. The solution keeps up with it, and then it'll tell you that you got to update.
Okay.
And so you update your packages, and then all the developers are in sync.
Yeah. A lot of tooling to be used throughout Visual Studio, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. But anyway, going back to adding the model. I probably want first to, if I haven't already, go into my package manager console, and I like to just do this. This has already been done, I believe, with just having updated, but you could also do it like this as well, installing the latest package of Entity Framework Core SQL Server. Okay, so if I ran that, we could see what it would do. 316. It didn't really do anything because we had already done it. So there's more than one way to update the packages that you need in order for this to work. So building our model. Models will actually aggregate here underneath the models folder. So if I want to bring on a new model, what I'm doing is creating a new class and therefore a new type. So if I right click and add in my models a new class down here at the bottom of my context menu, I can see that for me, it's defaulted to class.cs, which I don't want. So I'm going to name my class the same name as the object that I'm modeling, so movie. What that does is produces a file called movie.cs. And inside of that file is where our class definition is going to live. So this public class movie is the model that's going to eventually turn into our database table. So typically what I do here is I give it a property, public int ID. What that means is that this model has a publicly accessible property called ID that is of type integer. And the get set shorthand notation is there so that we can interact with it. We can have the ability to retrieve its value. And of course, SQL Server will be setting its value behind the scenes. So most of our models, all of the models, in fact, that will be used to create the database will have some sort of primary key. Entity Framework just likes ID. So I use ID, and it helps behind the scenes. Entity Framework can determine the relationships based on the naming convention. So all of my primary keys are going to be ID. And after that, we can start just putting in some of the more common properties for a movie, like a public string title. This is going to be so that I can add and manipulate a title for whatever movie that I wanted to create in my list of movies, or maybe I'm doing a movie review application.
Okay.
And then other properties can range from public string genre, like for the genre of the movie, let's say, and then maybe there is a public date time. There's a date time type that allows us to record both the date and the time of the release date for this. And I want to come back here in a second and add a couple of special data annotations here, but I'm going to get these basic properties down first so we can look at them. Another one that's helpful is a cost or a price. Okay. And let's see, what else do we have here? That's about good. A title, a genre, a release date, a price.
I like that.
Yeah, that's a good start, right? You could have other stuff, of course. But some of these things now need to be dealt with because, let's say, for example, someone wants to put in a title that's 5,000 characters long. We have options that allow us to say, no, the title can only be so long. It has a max length or a minimum length. There's data attributes that allow us to govern that. I could put one real quick here to let it know that it can't be any more than 50 characters. I mean, that's plenty for a movie title. So there is something in here called string length. Now, it doesn't say what the minimum length is. It says what the maximum length is. So in the process of building my model, I have to get a little bit specific when it comes to defining the properties. Okay. Now, for this release date, for example, this is a date time, and I'm going to tell it that it is a date type right here with a different annotation saying that the data type is a data type.date. Okay, so this is one of the many enums that's in the C# framework saying that this is a data type dot something. And if I do a dot there, there's all sorts of different values. Data type dot date, data type dot date time. right? There's all sorts of different values here, and it's there for you to use depending on what it is that you're trying to do.
That's because in this case, time's not relevant to a release date, is why you put date on there.
Right.
No one cares if it comes out at midnight or, I mean, actually, someone
7:03 p.m.
But the fact that but it says date time below, is that because there's only one type for that, or whatever it's?
So the difference between storing the values in it and then the actual defining the values as a C# data type.
Displaying the values.
Two different, there's two different things going on here.
Yeah. So another thing real quick is this release date. A lot of the times the properties of our model will double as labels on our views. So thinking ahead, if I were looking at a view, the label associated with my release date would be release date. And this is not really, the way that we're used to seeing words. So we have another annotation that allows us to control the way that these properties appear on the view. For example, display name. So now when I actually show this field or this property on a view, the label won't say release date, it'll say release space date. Okay, another annotation.
Cool.
And now this public decimal, we didn't have to do this in the past, but now we're being prompted to specify the precision of the decimal that we're defining. And I'm going to define this as a decimal 10,4, which means 10 total digits with 4 of them, with 2 of them coming to the right of the decimal place. So we can do that to further specify what the shape of our decimal is. And we can also do things like this.
I was going to put a little comment here. With COVID now, we probably have to put our decimals back to 0 because you got to have exact change. I'm just kidding.
Samsung Pay.
If anybody doesn't know, the US is apparently running out of change.
We're running out of coins somehow.
You can keep the 3 pennies, sir. I don't want to risk my life.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah. And then lastly, we can also do something like this. We could add a annotation that specifies what the values, what valid values are for this property. So if you were working in a system and your movie prices couldn't be any more than $50 and no less than $20, then our range would be 20 to 50 in here. And that would be validated against what I try to enter as the price of said movie. If it was less or more, the model would complain and tell me that there's been an error.
And you don't have to put in any decimal places in there or anything. It knows that it's 20.00 and 50.00. Is that
right?
Correct. Okay,
that's correct. Yep. Okay. And if we wanted to use that built-in validation, we could. And this would be right into the model. So the model would be validated as to whether or not it was good. At the moment, I'm looking like I've got this, which is going to be my primary key. I've got my title, which can be no more than 50. I've got a wide open genre, which could be an attack vector, but we're going to move forward. I've got a release date. I've got a 10.2 decimal. And I've got, I commented out my range, but there it is in the event that we needed to use that. I think I should be able to move forward to start the database creation process based on this model and some of the other models that have already been built for me behind the scenes for tracking users. In order for me to do that, I'm going to do the next step, usually after building a model, is to add what's called a migration. So I'm going to add a initial migration. I'm going to do that in my tools, NuGet Package Manager console. And down here at the bottom, I'm going to type in a command, add-migration, and I tabbed out after typing MI. I don't think there was anything else, so autocomplete went right to migration. And I'm going to give it a name, initial. So this is going to be the initial composition of my database, which is nothing at the moment.
And I would note too that what this is doing is creating SQL scripts, and so you can rerun these migrations too. And then you also can run them when you get a project for the first time and you need the database created locally. You don't have to go to the models, try to figure out or ask for a database from another developer. You just run the migrations and it creates it for you locally.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So before, this whole like managing the version of the database was a freaking nightmare. No, well, no, when someone changed the column name and then suddenly they broke 8 other guys' work,
okay.
this doesn't happen anymore. So it's kind of cool.
Cool. So by adding that add migrations, I should be able to create my database now by issuing a command of update -database. And I'll even throw in a flag of -v for verbose, because it gives me a little bit more information as to what's going on behind the scenes. It should actually show me the SQL commands necessary to generate these tables. So I like to look at these because you can see what's going on behind the scenes. It's kind of looking for evidence of a database being declared and found. It's looking at my model to see if you can't turn that into a database table. I'm not seeding any data at the moment, so my model builder is not doing anything with single tables. So by the time I'm done here, I'm expecting to have just a single custom table and 3 or 4 or 5 tables that have been built for me behind the scenes. Okay, so let's see, in fact, what happened. I'm going to bring up my SQL Server real quick, go make sure that this database was created, and then we can move forward, because I have to tell my project to be able to talk to my database by giving it properties in application DB context. We'll do that in a second here. I'm going to have a quick sanity check. And if I look in all of my databases, I should have a YouTube entry here. And then if we go down to my tables, we've got evidence of all of the tables that were created for us behind the scenes, but I'm missing my table that I just created. Actually, what I did was I created a class, but that class should have been here showing up as a table. And the reason it didn't is because of a problem in my application DB context class. So if we go back and take a look at the class that is responsible for communicating with the database, we will find if I find it by name, application DB context, this is the class that defines how we talk to our database. And in here, I'm pretty sure that I need a DB set in order for the model that is movies to turn into a table, and also so I could talk to it. So what we do here is we provide a public DB set, and this is going to be a set of type movie. So we're treating that movie class as a single record or an entity. We call the property movies, plural, and that basically represents, a collection of movie is movies, so that's the table name that we're going to be communicating with. This guy here just needs a using statement, so it sees the definition. And now that I've got this public DB set and I have a model with an int ID, I'm going to try and update database again. So I'm going to head right on back to my tools, NuGet Package Manager, go into the console, and now I'm going to up arrow accessing my command history, and I'll see what happens now. I'll do an update -database -v, and hopefully when I go back to my SQL, I'll see a movies table. If not, that would be something that we'd have to look into. But let's see, right click and refresh, And hopefully my movies table is not there. No, I missed something. If I come in here and I go up, there's my add migration initial. I'll run this again. It'll complain. I'll do my update database. And that should have allowed the table to create itself. But let's go take a look and see. I'll disconnect. I'll connect. And we'll see. If not, then I'll go forward with the scaffolding, and we'll see if there's any difference at all. This is my YouTube core demo. Here's my tables. And I'm still not seeing a movies table. Interesting. Okay. Anyway, let's go back to my application. And I've got a public DB set movies. This is my application DB context class. And let's go look around a little bit here because we've got a couple of things that we need to take a look at. In my startup.cs, I'm going to make sure that I'm looking at the correct database. This is default connection. Yeah, I think that might be part of the problem. So I'm going to go ahead and scaffold this model. So this model, the purpose of this model is so that we can store movies in a database. So in order for me to perform CRUD operations on this model, create, read, update, and delete, I need a controller based on this model that has actions to help us perform all those operations. And typically we don't write those ourselves from scratch. We allow the Visual Studio tooling to do that. So if I come into my controllers and do a right click and add a new scaffolded item, I'm going to see my wizard come up here. And all of these options allow us to do something slightly different. I'm going to be creating an MVC controller with views. So all of the views are going to be written for me, and they're going to be communicating to the database via Entity Framework. And this selection has a big impact on how everything is written. So if I click Add, it's going to ask me the model that I'm looking to scaffold. In this case is my movies model. And now the data context class, the class that is talking to the database. In the old version of ASP MVC5, we would choose this dropdown and it would show us the default entry. In Core, I'm just going to click on the plus and it's going to prompt me. And this actually gives me a prompt of YouTube core demo context, but that's actually not what we're using. I'm going to change this to the default of application DB context. It assumes we're going to, whoops. It assumes that we're going to use a context that's the same name as our application, but in fact, I'm using the scaffolded application DB context.
I think I can interject here real quick. I think that's important to understand too. Like you can have multiple database connections. Like your user store could be somewhere different, and your application store could be named after the application. So,
yeah, and oftentimes you do need multiple databases.
Right.
So we can have more than one database context, but by default, we're getting one with the project, and it's called application DB context. Now down here, the controller name that gets suggested for us is just a pluralization of the model with the word controller after it. So movies controller, and the expected functionality is that when this is done running, I'm going to have a new controller called movies controller, and I'm going to have the standard set of actions that allow us to perform CRUD operations, and I'm going to have the standard default set of views that go along with those CRUD operations. Index, create, edit, delete, details. And those are always created for us when we create a scaffolded controller with the related views. They're always the same. Now, the code inside is a little different because it's based on the model properties. But at a high level, the actions are always the same and the corresponding views are always the same because all they're doing is creating, reading, updating, and deleting records. So you can see that this is generating code. And when it gets done, it should show us the class that it generated.
Cool. So I have a question about the model that you set up too then. The way that you'd like written out that code, is that the standard way that gets written? Like it just gets written in that one file and it's just the different sections with a space in between them?
So this is pretty much standard C# code to create a class, to create a type. And it's really a definition of all the different properties, and sometimes, functionality is encoded in here too. So there's different methods that allow us to interact with the data. But yeah, what we're looking at here is a class, which is a pretty fundamental concept in C#. So in order for me to create something that is a blueprint for an object, it's going to be a class. So this particular line of code here that you see highlighted is a publicly available class called movie. And when we create a class in C#, we are creating a type. We're introducing a new type into C#. So this is a type movie. Between the open and closed curly braces is going to be where we define the composition of this model. And all of these lines are more or less properties with special attributes attached to them. So each one of these lines represents its own property. So this is a publicly accessible integer property called ID. This is a publicly accessible string property called title. This is a date time property called release date. So each one of these lines is what's actually shaping our model.
Okay.
The stuff on top of it, usually called data annotations, they give it extra meaning, maybe limiting it to a certain length, helping it to display on the form, giving it a range, even telling it what error to throw if I tell it that it has to be a minimum of 2 characters and you enter 1 character and try and save it. Ooh. All of these things are encoded for us with the help of some data annotations. So that this is very typical to see in a model.
Okay.
Yeah, and oftentimes we have a constructor as well, but I have no need for a constructor yet at this point. If I were going to introduce maybe a collection of user ratings, which would be children for the movie, then I could probably have a constructor that instantiates an I collection of that type, so we could have a relationship between the two.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. All right. So this is my movies controller. This is the controller that was written for us. And if we take a look at it in the Solution Explorer, first of all, look at that. There's a brand new file that is now present in the controllers folder that was not there before. This is the direct result of me scaffolding a controller and views based on my model. Now, if I expand this controller, we're going to see the common set of actions that are always produced for us when we scaffold a model. And it's basically index, detail, create, edit, delete. And we call those CRUD operations, the standard way to interact with data that is stored in a SQL server, for example. So now that this has been scaffolded, we do have a related views folder now. Let me collapse these. And now you can see down here in the views folder, there's now a movies subfolder. And if I expand this, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 default views, 1 for each corresponding action. Okay, so we've got create, delete, details, edit, and index. We'll always get this and always get this when we scaffold a model. So I'm kind of interested now in seeing what happens if I save this and run it.
Let's see.
Let's see if it works.
Let's see.
So Wallace is online.
So what I really want to do now is I want to first go out possibly to a place that would allow me to create my first blog post, for example. So actually what's happened is, as the result of scaffolding, I've got a new path that I'm going to try here. So let's cross our fingers. This is going to be called movies, which is the controller. And there is a corresponding action called create. So I'm curious to see if this is going to work. Now, the intended functionality here, guys, is that the request is movies/create. So my request should come into my application, go into the movies controller, find its way down to the create action, and then the create action renders the create view. If it works, we should see a page. If not, we'll see an error.
Cool.
Which one will we see? A page. Yay.
Oh, that's nuts. Look what it made. You didn't even do anything. Look what it made. That's crazy cool. I was like, when you said you were going to show this page, I thought it was just going to be blank because we haven't given it any data or anything yet.
Oh, wait, man.
No, it created it based on the model. And you noticed it knows what type it is by the drop down for the calendar.
Yeah, look at this. I can put my title here. This is brand new, by the way. This wasn't happening for me in 5. This is core. It knows that this is a date. Check that out. Built right in.
Calendar picker. That's cool.
Right. So I'm saying, and so let's just try and see what happens if I do this. I'm going to put in a title. I'll just call it demo title, and genre will be horror. And the release date is going to be tomorrow.
Wow.
And the price, 20 quid. 20 quid. Whatever that is.
20-something.
Yeah, 20-somethings from England. So now if I press this button, the idea is that I'm on my way to storing this new record into the database. So what's actually happening is what we're seeing is the result of an HTTP GET action to render the view. And that's what I saw. But now that I've interacted with it and I'm getting ready to press the button, it's going to gather up my information and push it all to an HTTP post action that's also named create. And let's see if this works. Oh, so we've got pending model changes for the application DB context. So this is suggesting to me that something has changed since the last time I produced the model. Now, what usually we do is we add a migration every time something changes. So it's suggesting that we run an add migration and then another update database. I'm going to try and do that and see if it works. If not, we'll have to see what's going on behind the scenes because it's something that shouldn't be happening. So let's go try and fix this real quick. Let's go look at our movies. Public class movie, public int ID. All this looks good. And I made some changes here. So let's stop. And I'll come into my tools and my NuGet package manager console, up arrow a couple times, and I'll just add another migration because I added annotations. So I'll just give it some name so that I can indicate that something's changed. So I've added a new migration, and that's going to help get the database structure to the current structure. And now update -database. Okay, and let's see what happens now if we try and do this. Now, if something happens to where we can't actually store the data, then I'm going to have to go and see what's going on behind the scenes. Now, behind the scenes, we start to get into some configuration, and configuration is done very differently in Core than it was in the previous version. So let's hope that we don't have to get into that, or we might have to have a part 2.
I have a follow-up to this.
Follow-up. So let's see. This is going to be the name of my controller and the name of my action. And now I'm going to have some stuff in here. Genre action. And we'll have the release date and the price, 30. Now, I want to kind of see what's going on a little bit. And behind the scenes, this is going to submit to a post. And this is where the problem would come in. So I'm going to come down in here to my create HTTP post and put a breakpoint here and see what's going on. So this is where it lands when I press create. And now you can see that the breakpoint has been hit, so I can start doing things like inspecting the incoming data. So I'll do that. I'll hover over my variable. I've got a genre of action. I've got a price. I've got a release date. And I've got a title. All these things came in from the form. So now what's happening here? This is going to be interacting with my application DB context through this underscore context variable. And now this may very well be where the problem is, because this is an instance of the class that's been injected into the controller, which is different than the previous version. So let's take a step through this. And let's see, is my model any good? It is. So I didn't violate anything that was encoded in my model. Nothing was too long, nothing was too short. And now my context.add movie, if this blows up, then we know that it has something to do with an inability to talk to the database. But let's see what happens here. Well, that seemed to have worked, didn't blow up. And let's just move forward with a continue to see what happens here. Because what's going to happen is after it's done saving the changes, it's going to redirect me back to the index. And we're going to come up here and try and run this. So if I don't have a .movies DB set to talk to, this would blow up on me. Luckily for me, it's C# and it wouldn't even be able to run if there was none. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here to see exactly what happens when I continue executing this code. And it looks to me like we're actually going back through and getting ready to execute the underscore context.movies.toList async, which says go out to the database, grab up all of the movies, and turn them into a list asynchronously, and then shove them into the view so that the view can list them or show them. So far, there's no indication of a problem. Let me continue. And there we have it, folks.
This time it worked.
Well, the reason why it didn't work before is because it was actually it was helping us because we made a change to our model and we never did an update database, which means the two were out of sync. And when that happens, all bets are off. So
I'm going to come back to this comment again because Adam called me out. You didn't do anything to build this. It built this view itself too, right?
Yeah, well, I did all this from scratch. No, I didn't do any of this. This is the best part, guys.
That's
if you're
cool.
sitting, yeah, I mean, if you think about it this way, you're sitting at your job. The guy next to you is good. He knows what he's doing, but has no idea of these tools. And you come along and you're a junior developer, but you know about these tools. You're going to be up and running quickly in no time. You might be able to produce a functional but ugly app when the guy next to you ain't going to be able to produce anything.
So let's say, so I have a question for you. Let's say this has 1,000 entries in it, right? Mm-hmm. Would this use I'm assuming this doesn't do pagination and that kind of stuff by default, does it? It would just give me 1,000 things on a page, or would it? Well, yes. If we said to go out and get them all and turn them into a list, yeah, it would show them as 1,000. But we do have ways to combat that. Okay, that's what but you do have to but you have to take some action to be able to do that.
Yeah,
default. Okay.
Now the action can be that we can get groups of smaller records in the controller, or more likely we're going to acquire something that knows how to do paging for us.
Okay.
Like a paged list pager.
Okay.
And then we can just tell we can configure it to say that every page of results will be this many records. So if we have 100 records and we say 10 pages per record, then we'll have 10 pages of results to page through.
That's cool.
We can do that manually, or we can do that with data tables. We can do that a lot of different ways. But yeah, to actually get it done is all about knowing the tooling that's available to you.
Okay, well, I have a couple of questions. We're a little bit over, but I do have a couple of questions anyway. We wrap this thing up because this is interesting.
I'll take this one. So, like, I think what we're showing you is where scaffolding can get you started. Mm-hmm. Obviously, inside of Coder Foundry, we don't accept scaffolded views for finished work, and so at the end of the day, this is an HTML file with Bootstrap template. You can change this to however you want, and so ASP.NET can target extremely large web projects. So it's definitely made from small to very large projects. It's really well scalable as well. So,
I think from my perspective, the point is this has already pulled in the information that you need, and then you can just manipulate it however you like,
right, and
make it look however you like. But you've got something to at least to start off with to test the concept out.
Right.
That's cool.
So with database first programming, I can type in my models. I've got my models described. I can scaffold all those models and have all my CRUD done in minutes. And so, like, notice that the edit, details, and delete also work and function. I don't have to use any of these views. I can do whatever I want, but like you can now change these.
So imagine putting together a quick in-house app. It's going to be unbelievable the speed with which you can do it, and they're going to look at you like you're a god because the older technology did not let us do this type of rapid application development.
So, but to point out, Abdullah, you can target a project of any size that you want with ASP.NET. There's nothing in here that restricts you from doing something big. We're just showing you how you can build the CRUD pages really quickly. So typically when you talk about large projects, it's usually scale. You're more concerned about your backend database, that being SQL Server. That scales to as big as any other database out there on the planet. So, whatever you want to do, you can do with ASP.NET.
That's cool. Ulrich is asking if this live video will be uploaded to the channel. It will be. It takes a little while for it to be. It takes
a minute, about a day.
It takes a minute for it. Yeah, YouTube has to encode it, but it will be there. We don't have any control over when it gets posted. YouTube does it on the back end, but it will be there. It'll be on the channel.
Would you like to see anything else, Bobby or Kevin?
And so Abdul's had another question, maybe use multiple databases. Absolutely. So like I was saying before earlier, that the connection strings that we're using or the context that's inside of the database can be one to n. So like you can hit multiple and typically a use case scenario would be, let's say I'm working at enterprise and I'm using a user store or some kind of identity framework. That would be in one database, all my users are in, and then my application database would be here. But let's say even beyond that, you have something like another database that has, product data or something like that you're hitting. But you can have any set of database context in here.
Would that be a typical thing for a company then, to have like a user database and a product database, and they're two totally separate things?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So especially when you want like cross SEO type things where not SEO but SSO, like you want single sign-on or something like that. Okay. That user store is usually separated from the application store, so that you can you hit that, you get a key back, and then you authenticate based on that. So it's definitely
okay. Awesome. Yeah, there's a million things I'd like to talk about, Jason, but we're gonna have to come back and do it again, I think.
Yeah, we'll have to come back. There's a lot of things we can tell about. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. What we want to show the audience here is, if you're not into .NET, you're not into ASP.NET, and you're not into C#, which is fine. We want to show you like how you can get something up to speed very quickly, that you can build out at scale. And I also read some comments about EF being slow, and any OARM can generate SQL in general. And so like there can be scenarios where it's slow, and that usually has to do with either the complexity of your model or something like that. In that case, you have to like look into what SQL's been generated, and then maybe kind of take over that SQL. Maybe that's a stored procedure or something else. But usually the slowdown typically isn't your RM that's doing it for you. So like even using Dapper versus EF, it's usually not EF's fault, the reason why it's slow. But sometimes when you have a very complex model, and you're trying to pull them all back together in Link or something like that, it can get slow. And so you need to target store procedures for those.
So I just saw you there, Jason. This has built-in authentication.
Yeah.
Well, when I started the project, I chose individual user account authentication built right in, extensible too.
Wow. So right now you could have built this application to be like something behind a paywall or something, or behind an account, basically.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's crazy cool.
Yeah, we could also have cloud like Auth0 type stuff where we do authentication in the cloud. Whether it's we can do all sorts of stuff, including what's it called? Oh, I can't think of it right now. But yeah, Auth0 will be one of those online services that would give us a reason for splitting out databases into multiple databases, because someone else could potentially be controlling our users and their permissions. And then we just call a web API and move forward from there. And maybe all of our product or all of our content is in a different database.
Yeah. So a common scenario, Kevin, is like I want to use LinkedIn or Facebook as my login, my user store.
Okay. Yeah.
Or I may want to use a third party like Auth0. Or if I'm going to Azure, I may use Azure AD as my user store. And in all those scenarios, this application can go look at those user stores through .NET Core. So like you just got to code them up. When we do all of this inside of Coder Foundry, where you hook your register up to multiple external authorizations or authentication services.
Okay.
So
this is cool. And I know you saw this already, Bobby, but Bandito was asking, you build a demo .NET integration front end like SPA, like React or Vue in the future. So that's something we will look at. Yeah.
Yeah. So like inside of Visual Studio, there's also a SPA template, and right now you can run the exact same thing that Jason just went through, and it'll be hooked up to React or hooked up to Angular. I think it supports React and Angular. I don't think there's a Vue one just yet, but it's pretty easy to do.
I'm not familiar with that. SPA, SPA, it's SPA?
Single page app.
Okay.
Single page app.
Okay.
Yeah. So like, so it's a JavaScript front end basically.
Yep. Cool. This was awesome. This was super good. Thanks for the demo.
One for the road. I'll ask this: is the AuthDB different from the movies in this app? Not in this case. No, we put them in the same table. Jason, we can share your screen and you can go look in the database. They're in there now because we ran migrations.
So connecting back to my SQL Server, this is the database that it created. By default, it likes to just tack ASP.NET in front of the name of the project and tack up, what used to be a date stamp, but now this is a GUID, it looks like, at the end of it. Mm-hmm. So that's another difference between the two. But here, our tables now, better have that movies table there now. I'll be like, I don't know how that works.
It came from something.
It wasn't there. So
you can right-click in there and just show the data in there, yeah. So
let's right-click and show this movie data that I created on my Create page, and see what it stores for us. So in the back end, very simple data model, but here is everything that I added.
Cool.
Yeah, and also, yes, you saw me register a user through there. So my ASP.NET users table is where that's going to be stored. If I right-click that, this is where the default user information is stored here. There's my username, and look at that, a normalized username. That's new for Core. And that's
you didn't have to write any SQL either to put this in here, did you? It just
did
it
itself.
Migrations
do. Migrations writes the SQL for you. So what Microsoft's trying to do is simplify the process of creating database-bound applications so that you don't have to write as much SQL. And before this, you would have to go and model your data in SQL Server, you create a database, and then you go to your app and write all the plumbing to get it connected up.
Yep.
Sometimes you even write your own context and your own plumbing and all that kind of stuff. And now you don't have to do that with Entity Framework, which is just an ORM, and you can use other ORMs if you want to. But EF is built in. It's what you can use by default.
That's cool.
Yeah. Very efficient.
Bandito asked the question, is an ORM behind the scenes. Yeah, that's what Entity Framework basically. That's what it is. It's managing your objects and relating that to your database. So it's built in. So it's too heavy for some guys, and I understand there's a lot of questions in there. So if you want to use something like Dapper, absolutely you can. If you'd like to do that, there's a lot more work in doing that, but you have more control over that. It's not as black boxy as EF is. Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Okay,
though.
great.
All good.
Yeah,
right.
we ran over a little bit today, but I think it's great because I think there's a lot of good stuff in here.
So Jason, you did a good video today.
Yeah. All right.
You get a double thumbs up.
Excellent. Excellent.
I like it.
No one better steal my joke either.
Inheritance.
I'm sure you'll have another one
Coming
next
on
time.
today, Jason. Get back to work, working on our super project.
All right, guys. You're very welcome. I had fun. I hope to come back someday soon.
All right. See you later.
Thanks, Jason.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. That was super good. I learned a ton today.
Okay, cool.
So that was super good. Yeah, we'll have to have Jason come back and we'll build something else with it.
All right, cool. All right. Well, I think we're done, man. It's time for lunch. It's 1:30.
Yeah, it is. Yep. Let me see. For anybody here that's new today, thank you for joining us. We super appreciate it. There's a couple of things you can do for us. Obviously, like the video. That'd be great. That helps us. Subscribe. Again, we have a new pre-produced video coming out tomorrow. So I have that already scheduled up. So that'll be out tomorrow morning. And then we'll be back live Wednesday, Thursday. And then we may have another video out on Friday again, which we're working on. So
yeah, I think we're working on a video. I'll be in the studio tomorrow shooting. So
yep.
You know.
So we have a bunch of content coming out this week, and we're going to keep going with this. We're going to keep doing the live. We're going to switch over our live thing here shortly and give you guys some more stuff to do on here as well. So that's going to be super cool. Yeah, that's pretty much all.
So that's it, man. So I think we can go to lunch now.
Yeah, I'm hungry.
All right. Good luck and keep coding, guys. See you tomorrow.